The Craig Foley Show on Deadline Detroit is made possible in part by Lynette's Shrimp House, located in Highland Park. It's Metro Detroit's premier destination, serving juicy fried shrimp, fish, and wings, alongside soul food sides and new additions to the menu like turkey tacos and desserts. Located at 13548 Woodward in Highland Park, just north of the Davison, Lynette's is open for takeaway, noon to 8 Tuesday and Thursday, noon to 10 p.m. Friday and Saturday, and noon to 5 p.m. on Sunday. Call now, get some Lynette's. Hey everybody, happy Friday. Welcome to the Craig Foley Show on Deadline Detroit, and it is time once again for our weekly segment, The Week That Was on Deadline Detroit, where we break down the important stories in the news each and every week. And boy, do we have some fun ones this week. And as usual, I have a great panel here with me to discuss things. We have Alan Lengel, of course, who is the editor and co-founder of Deadline Detroit with us today. Hello, sir.
Hello.
Also, Nancy Derringer of Deadline Detroit back once again.
Great to be here.
And we have Todd Perkins, who, of course, is a local attorney and a frequent guest on the program. We appreciate you here, Todd. Thank you.
Hey, glad to be here.
And by the way, Todd just gave us an expert lesson in tying a bow tie. One try, no mirror, bam. And look at this guy. Look at this guy. It's amazing.
A little bit, there we go. I feel like W.C. Fields a little bit.
Perfect. And we have a newcomer to the program today. I'm very excited to have Brendan Walsh with us. He, of course, is a corporate executive, a blogger, a former member of the Grosse Pointe Public School Board, and also a self-proclaimed budget nerd. And I'll tell you what, in his time on the Grosse Pointe Public Schools, I learned more about public school financing than I ever think I needed to know. But he was somebody who kept them on the straight and narrow for sure. So, Brendan, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you here.
So happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, and I'm glad to have you here because we are going to talk budgets in a little bit when we get into Infrastructure Week, which looks like it's actually starting this time around. And we're talking trillions of dollars. But before we get to that, we have to start with somebody who I think would be a unanimous nominee for Schmuck of the Week, which we will do later on for some of the lesser known schmucks. But Florida Congressman Matt Gaetz, what a week he is having. Matt Gaetz, who, of course, if you have not followed this program before, he has been a Schmuck of the Week nominee on numerous occasions for just saying outlandish things and being a total Trump sycophant, which is what he was known for. But now he is treading new ground, blazing new territory in Congress, and apparently likes to show off naked pictures of his female conquests to his fellow congresspeople while on the floor, among other things. Matt Gaetz, Nancy, I'm going to
guys do
on this
that?
one because
is that a thing guys do?
I have never done that before.
Okay. I mean,
I have never thought to do that before.
I'll tell you who the guys, it's the same guys who become cops because they were the schmucks when they were in school. Right. It's the same people who've never had, who've never been confident in their own surrounding. But here, you can't talk about Gaetz without talking about Greenberg.
Yeah, I know.
We've got time.
I got it.
This story is getting really, really weird. It started this week with news that the New York Times discovered that there was an investigation into whether or not Matt Gaetz was hanging out with underage women. And then it's gotten stranger and stranger since then. Now we're talking about whether or not he paid to have sex with underage women. Did he transport them across state lines for these purposes? And yes, then we meet the friend, Mr. Greenberg, who's now looking like he's in some real trouble as well. And it's just getting weirder and weirder. Well, and like I said, Nancy, I want to ask you about this first, because this dude sounds like the creepiest dude of all time. I think skeevy is the word I heard somebody use this morning on NPR.
As though we couldn't already know that from his really weird resemblance to, is it Butthead or Beavis?
It would be, yes.
It's Butthead. It's Butthead. He looks just like Butthead. But anyway, no, it's a really skeevy story, and it starts with, and I think we need to note that the investigation, the lawyer can maybe get into more of the language here, but the target of the investigation was this guy Joel Greenberg down in Florida, who is a friend of Gaetz, but apparently also has, if the allegations are to be believed, abused his office to an almost astounding degree in an effort to hook up with young women. And I was reading the story, and by young, he would claim, well, they're of age, but some of these women may have been under 18. And I understand that he has done things like take IDs that were surrendered to his office, which some people have to do in the course of, paying fines or whatever, and then altering them to look like, or so that he could give them to these women when they came to visit him. But then he and Gaetz were supposedly finding women through these sugar daddy sites, sugar baby sites, they call them, which is essentially consensual well, I guess all prostitution is kind of consensual, but it's where young women go to older men and say, yes, I will have sex with you and we can negotiate the price. And, you can do this and that for me. So, it's so tawdry.
And the thing is, the price may not be, actual cash, but it may be in exchange for a trip, a hotel room, nice fancy dinners, that kind of stuff. So basically an escort service with benefits, I guess.
An escort service with a privately negotiated price list, shall we say.
Exactly. And now the New York Times says they have receipts from Gaetz for some of these cash apps. That was reported this morning. And I mean, the week started out, though, strangely enough, in that this news comes out, and the first thing that he decides is a good idea to do is go on Tucker Carlson's show on Fox News, which I think all of us have probably seen the video of this right now at this point in time. But the first thing he does is basically admit to a bunch of stuff that nobody knew about. And then say that there's an extortion scheme. And my favorite part about this was there was a prosecutor that was on the news the next day saying, just because you're, the subject of an investigation and not the target doesn't mean you're free and clear.
His first mistake was going on the Tucker Carlson show. You know what I'm saying?
Todd, I mean, he admitted to a bunch of stuff that nobody was talking about yet. And then that just opened up the floodgates.
But you see, like I said, remember last week I was on, I said the real fear about some of these clowns that we see, they're the leaders of the country. These are the people who are running this massive economy. And, they are the people that we've elected, but it doesn't make them smart, doesn't make them not criminals, and it doesn't make them, even savvy. You can at least respect people who may meander the law, who have some savviness about it. It's just,
they're smart criminals. These are dumb criminals. Right.
They're Coen brothers criminals, I think.
I think that's apt, Brendan. I mean, like I said, and for me, watching that interview with Tucker Carlson, you could see that Tucker Carlson was clearly uncomfortable with some of the things that Matt Gaetz was saying. And, backpedaled so fast on a couple of these when Gaetz kept trying to rope him into this whole thing, like, hey, you're part of this. You and I have both had similar problems. And Tucker Carlson was like, oh, hell no.
Yeah.
But I don't have it. I'm not giving Tucker Carlson any break on that either. He is part of it. He told, Gaetz, he's saying what's the truism. This is what the underbelly of what they talk about. We are all in this together, so when he gets on that show, he's only saying what they've been trained. It's how did we get to January 6th? And there's really no, you get a president of the United States who's directing these people and the coordination that underlies all of that thing. This is all the same thing. They're all the same network. They're all on the same page. And so Gaetz is just telling them when he gets on that show, hey, you're part of this, because he knows he is.
Well, but also, I mean, you said, why does he immediately run when he finds out this is, going to break? Why does he immediately run to Tucker Carlson? It's because that's all he knows. It's like, a smart person, the first call would be to their lawyer. And the first thing the lawyer would say to them is, don't make any statements about this.
If you knew the script, though, of how to grab your side view of the high ground, that is what you would do. You would go on Fox News and say, let me give everybody a clear understanding of how we're going to frame this and approach it. And that seems to be what they do, because it ups the ante continuously on the zaniness of the actions, and then they just come forward with it and say, yeah, I did. That's what I did.
But go ahead, Alan.
I was going to say it used to be in Washington when you wanted to really go up against it, you went on Meet the Press to show that you had nothing to hide. If you really wanted to get softball questions, you went on Larry King. And usually attorneys would arrange something after the case had been out for a while to go on Larry King. And Larry King would occasionally ask a tough question, but he would allow you to dodge it. So I have this one thing. Andy Borowitz has written a column, and it says, study. People picturing Matt Gaetz having sex may never have sex again.
I mean, but part of the problem though, Brennan's right. I mean, this is what you do if you want to go get this doing. If you think you're going to know the script, but he went off the script when he implicated Tucker Carlson in this, when he suggested that Tucker Carlson had dinner with he and one of his friends. And Tucker Carlson says, I don't remember any of that. I don't recall right off the bat. And then he goes on to say, hey, Tucker, I'm not the only one on the screen right now that's had horrible accusations put against them, reminding the public that there was, some questions about Tucker Carlson, which I don't think they ever panned out to anything. And it sounds like it was a sort of a deranged fan who accused him a long time ago. But Tucker was none too pleased with the fact that this was brought back into public. So he just made an enemy out of Fox News. And if Tucker Carlson's not on your side, he has nowhere to go. I mean, he was looking to Newsmax apparently to get out, leave Congress and go to Newsmax. They're not going to touch him now. And I mean, it was a classic lesson in stupid behavior in terms of television and what you can say.
He doesn't need to go anywhere but to a good lawyer's office. And I stress the good lawyer part, because we've seen a lot of schmucks that have just been on the news, and just because they have the opportunity to have the limelight on them, and Trump had given them that opportunity, but just because you got a bar number doesn't make you good. You know what I'm saying? The first thing a lawyer tells you is just don't say anything. But we also understand, as I've represented politicians and I've represented public figures, there's a legal court, and then there's the court of public opinion. And unfortunately for politicians, they kind of have to balance both of them if they're concerned about their political aspirations and their political careers. But if they're not, it becomes easy. Listen to your lawyer, shut the hell up, and then, something, if you don't talk, you just might walk. That's, the street lingo.
But
go ahead, Brendan. I like that. I'm going to get a tattoo.
Isn't it just as easy, though, if the other side of that equation is public opinion, that you can have no fear about them turning on you? And that appears to be the dynamic right now. It's like, what are you going to do? Everybody's on my side. Who's going to counter me, given that I'm just playing the party line, which is absurd,
Well, but at the same time, he also, I think, made the serious mistake of accusing somebody within the Justice Department of trying to extort money from him. Right. And so it's amazing how, if there indeed is this investigation that he is helping with, which is what he suggested, his father wore a wire because somebody was trying to, blackmail him or extort him, whatever, that's going on. Well, one, you just screwed up their investigation because now the people that you're talking to, nobody's going to talk to his dad ever again. And amazingly, as soon as he threw the Justice Department under the bus, all kinds of new information started flowing out about this investigation. So, I mean, did he make his own case worse by pissing off the Justice Department?
Well, that sounds like he did, but I'd leave that one to Todd. I mean, that's, they've clearly had enough. And William Barr apparently was Attorney General when this whole thing was launched, which tells you something right there. And they said that. And
Trump was briefed.
Yeah. And they said that, Barr would never be alone or would never attend a meeting with Gaetz because he was afraid that he was going to get buttonholed on the way out the door, from, oh, what are you doing? Well, he just didn't want to be anywhere near Matt Gaetz for from the last part of the Trump administration. But, this is going to be a test because obviously the Florida Panhandle is not exactly what you'd call a blue district.
Sure.
But, respectable Republicans at some point are going to have to draw the line. I mean, the hardcore 30% of Trump, sycophants, they'll probably stand by this dolt. But, at some point he's got to lose some support for this. I mean, this is, it's just gross, 17-year-old girls and fake IDs and seekingarrangement.com and all this other stuff. I mean, it's even a Trumper has got to find this repellent.
Well, and again,
see, the problem though is, Nancy, you're the eternal optimist. You're the utopia.
Oh my gosh!
And the reason why
we're laughing at that one.
Why that is for 2 to 3 and 4 years, we've been saying real Republicans got to stand up, and I know that they're out there. Individually,
he's not Donald Trump.
We see them out there. It's just like, this thing that Biden is pushing about this this new infrastructure thing, the people want it, Republicans and Democrats, but the Republican Party has said no, we're going to vote no on it. And, so I don't know why we keep on thinking that they're going, because I believe in the spirit of Harriet Tubman. If I was on that side, I'm going to kill them first. The ones who stand in the middle of the line that want to claim that they don't agree with Trump and things like that. No, let's get you out of the way, because let's define the line so that they're not blurred anymore, because they're the problem. They create the blurriness in the line. No, let's get you out of the way. Let's get either a Democrat or a hardcore Republican in there, and we'll know how to fight from that point forward. Because those blurry are the lines right there, and hoping that they'll come across and come out of their shell. No, they're cowards. They're weak. They're soft, and they're nothing but a little bunch of. I stop there.
Hands up! Don't shoot. Okay. Because I want to fight on your side in this.
I agree. I agree with you though in spirit, though, Nancy. But we've been saying it for 2-3 years.
Yeah.
Well, here, hold on a second. Before we switch topics, I do want to, point this out today. That this morning, Politico put out some excerpts of John Boehner's new memoir, which is coming out, I believe, in 2 weeks. And I just want to read one paragraph from this book to give you an idea of where he's going with this and what the situation is in Washington right now that Todd is talking about, because John Boehner does not hold back in this book. I know he's been investing in some cannabis companies, and I'm thinking that maybe he just got really baked one night and decided to lay it all out there. Because here's one paragraph that was just published this morning in Politico. It says, "Under the new rules of Crazy Town, I may have been speaker, but I didn't hold all the power. By 2013, the Chaos Caucus in the House had built up their own power base thanks to fawning right-wing media and outrage-driven fundraising cash. And now they had a new head lunatic leading the way, who wasn't even a House member. There is nothing more dangerous than a reckless asshole who thinks he is smarter than everyone else. Ladies and gentlemen, meet Senator Ted Cruz."
Wow.
That is just one paragraph. And the excerpt that is in Politico today, I highly recommend people check it out, because I will get this book, because it looks like he is willing to tell the truth about everyone and just how nuts it is. And, he goes off on everybody who's talking about birth certificates and birtherism and Benghazi and everything, and just talking about how he was just trying to hold it together and he just couldn't do it anymore.
And John Boehner, the guy that basically is the new Dean Martin, the guy that you always expect to see with a rocks glass in his hand, shaking it and, telling you something like your drunk uncle. I mean, for him to be doing this and probably, like you said, getting high on his own supply, that's pretty funny.
Well, the thing is, I'm not happy with him either. He's one of those weak son of a guns who sat there and allowed it. And if he felt that way, then, let's announce it. Go tell it on the mountain. Have some balls at some point in time in your career. Now you want to do it. And, it's what they're doing. He's doing the thing like my grandmother said. He's throwing a rock and hiding his hand. He no longer has any political aspirations, so he wants to tell now. I mean,
he does talk about how Michelle Bachmann, who was a freshman, incoming House, basically was just trying to pull a power deal on him, saying, "Hey, if you don't give me Ways and Means, I'm going on Fox News, I'm going on Tucker, and I'm going to go on with Hannity, and they're going to force your hand." And he instead said, I offered her instead, intelligence or whatever she ended up on, and he's like, it seemed to work out okay, but I realized at that point I didn't have any power to control this anymore the way I did just a couple of years earlier.
I'm going to blow it all the way up. I'm going to go on Fox News, because then I'll go on MSNBC as a Republican and I'll tell it. You know what I'm saying? So that's how we're going to do this. So you can't, something, you can't win with somebody who doesn't care. You know what I'm saying? I care about the country, but I don't care about these party lines. Just like, hey, I'm caught in the crosshairs right now. I love Pete Lucido, but I don't like what he's doing with our governor. You know what I'm saying? So I'm caught up. You know what I mean? I've never, supported a Republican like I do him. You know what I'm saying? Never. I got Democratic friends who are mad at me. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, what?
I can understand that.
It's interesting. We talk about people who don't speak up till afterwards. I mean, Dr. Birx, Dr. Redfield. What was going on? I mean, at some point they should have come out and said, "I quit." this is ridiculous. It's not like they didn't have the resume to get another job or to even, open a practice or do whatever.
That stuff was pretty damning this week, though, from all those people who were talking about
it was horrible. It was horrible. It reminds you of like what kind of fascist government we were living under for those 4 years.
But I think there's some kind of intoxication. It must happen because, I look at Dr. Burke. I'm more mad at her than anyone because as a woman, I think Trump was less in a position to do anything to her than even Fauci. You understand? Because she's an accomplished doctor. She's got all these credentials. She's good looking, and she wears it well. She could have done anything she wanted to do, even more than Dr. Fauci, who's probably not the best guy to look at. You know what I'm saying? You see what I'm saying from the optics perspective.
She could have, like at any time during a press conference, walked behind Trump, taken one of her scarves, and done a mob thing on him.
Well, I mean, Brendan, I want to get your take on this because, this party is a far cry from what it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. Obviously, they seem to be having a real identity crisis at the moment about which direction they want to go in. And I mean, is there a path forward with this current crop of people running things?
Well, do they have an identity crisis, or is it the majority of the party that's saying, no, man, this is our identity and we're rolling with it, and that's what enables the behavior of a Gaetz or of Marjorie Taylor Greene or these types? I mean, where is the consequence for any of this? And that's why we can be as outraged and surprised and shocked as we want about what Matt Gaetz is doing, but until we see a consequence, does it matter? I mean, we just went through 4 years of some of the most outrageous behavior that we've ever seen. Was there ever really a consequence? This guy lost by 11,000 votes. I mean, yeah.
Well, but I still think his consequence may be coming based on some recent rulings and some other things. But the evidence will be coming out soon.
Nobody really on a national level has paid a significant price. Nobody.
That's very true. And I'll be interested to see what Gaetz is forced to do with this one. I mean, is he going to have to resign? So we'll see. Oh, Lynn Walsh, there has to be a Matt G missed connections gold mine out there. Oh, thanks, Lynn. Appreciate that very much. That's
me.
All right.
Distinguished 30-something with great hair. You, hot, young.
But again, going back to it, it's got to be something about being in that power circle that intoxicates regular, smart people to just fall in love and allow these things. Because, one thing I liked about Boehner, even though he was giving Obama the business, you could see he was not happy sitting in that seat all those years when he was, so you could tell. Yeah, he wanted to have that sifter and just go.
The bloodshot eyes were always a giveaway.
Yeah,
there's another day I'm going to start drinking it.
Yeah, he was not comfortable, but it's what happens in the element of and being in those realms in that higher echelon of power that causes people to do that. So I say all this stuff and I talk junk. What happens if I don't ever want to aspire to do those things, but I don't know. Is this something that happens when you get up there and that you just fall in love with it? I mean,
well, oh, go ahead, Brandon.
I mean, it's got to be money. I mean, and that's what drives the thing. And who has succeeded John Boehner in Ohio, the wrestling coach? I mean, we're only going down the chain, but it's working for them. So
it certainly seems to have trickled down to the state level. We have seen a number of states who are attempting to install new restrictions on voting rights, and we've spent a little time talking about that. But the one thing that happened this week, which was interesting, is that there is now some economic pressure being put on states like Georgia for enacting some of these restrictions. You have the CEOs of Delta and Coca-Cola stepping up and saying, no, we don't support these. It was sort of tepid at the beginning, but they've come out a little bit more forcefully after recognizing that there's a national backlash for supporting these changes to the Georgia law. There's talk about moving the baseball all-star game out of Atlanta if indeed some of these things go forward. The governor himself just came out the other day and said this isn't about fraud. He just admitted that. So every single case that comes, and there's going to be a bunch of lawsuits over these, is going to use that line from the governor where he said, look, none of these changes are really about fraud.
Of course they're not about fraud.
But he admitted it. He admitted it. And so now it's just like, is the corporate pressure going to make any difference, or are these people not going to care and they're going to push forward anyway? Because Arizona backed off the other day. They don't have the votes in their Republican caucus to go ahead with some of the changes that were passed in Georgia, which they're trying to do there as well. Michigan obviously trying its own thing. We'll see what happens there. But will the corporate pressure make a difference?
That's a good question. And I have to think, let's see, what was the last big thing that, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act shenanigans that went on during the end of the Obama administration? It certainly worked in Indiana. The NCAA leaned on them. A number of other large corporations leaned on them, and it worked. Whether it will work in Georgia, hard to say. Maybe we'll have to defer to the corporatist in my upper right-hand corner of the screen.
Well, I think it's going to depend on what kind of company it is. I'm sorry. I didn't cut anyone off?
No, go ahead. Go ahead, Tom.
Okay. I think it's going to depend on which company it is and what they bring to the table and how much money they're giving out there to these, not to that direct candidates, but how much, because you can only give so much to a candidate, right? But you can give these infinite amounts of money to these PACs. And that's what's going to.
The companies that are flexing their muscles on this are, they're like Delta Airlines,
the big corporate
Apple
citizens,
Computer, big corporate 900-pound gorillas. And so, Hobby Lobby is probably not going to get on the train, but if you've got Apple and Delta on your side, you don't need them. Go ahead, Brendan.
Yeah, I mean, some data according to my brand here. I'll throw a couple of things out. Coca-Cola and Delta have far bigger problems than what sort of tax subsidy they're going to get from the state of Georgia. The Coca-Cola's revenues are down over 11% in 2020, largely due to pandemic. Delta, hold on to your seats, are down 64%. This company went from 47 billion of revenue to 17 billion of revenue. I mean, wow. and in Georgia state revenue, the corporations account for just 1.5%. So I think what you're starting to see now is the corporation saying, whatever, Mr. or Mrs. Georgia state senator, you're nothing to me, and I think that we're really starting to get into what's runs the system, which are the tax credits, and ultimately public opinion. And I think we'll see more of this. You're seeing it in Texas. You're seeing it with Dell now in Texas, American Airlines. They're coming out against those laws. So I don't think that the state governments hold as much power as they think they do.
But I think, after January 6th, after a lot of Republicans voted to not certify the election, there were a lot of corporations, including Ford at the time, who just said we're halting all contributions, although now they're coming back and saying, well, we'll look at each case on a case-by-case basis. But there were quite a few corporations that pulled back. And I think collectively the voice of corporations is strong and they bend. Corporations quickly bend.
Yeah, I was happy to see that they actually did decide to come down on the right side of history. Restricting people's right to vote is never a good thing. It's been done time and time again in this country, obviously. And
what is this? I mean, how did anybody justify this ending Sunday voting, which is a long tradition in Georgia, particularly in the Black church, and this no water or food to people waiting in hours-long lines?
And Fox and Friends this a couple of days ago, and you know how much I love that morning show, Fox and Friends, Steve Doocy and Brian Kilmeade, we're sitting there saying, well, when's the last time you were standing in line at a sporting event and somebody came up and gave you water? And I'm like, you know what? You're not standing in line at a sporting event. Even for the longest bathroom line at a baseball game, you're not in line for 8 hours in the sun in Atlanta. It's not
because they're there to make money and they're going to get you in and out of that line as quickly as possible. It's not the same as voting.
Well, exactly. And they just sat there and go, they acted like this was some sort of entitlement for Black voters in their conversation. Like, what, are Black people entitled to special privileges when they're in line voting? I'm like, they are entitled to the same privileges as everybody else. A speedy, efficient way to vote. Polling places that match the population numbers. People that don't have to drive 20 miles to get to a polling place or a drop box. These are things that they should be guaranteeing everybody in this country. And the only people that are bitching about this kind of stuff are people who've never experienced conditions like that.
What do you?
I think there's
go ahead, Brendan.
One little piece of history too, though. When you think about, now I think the federal government has been activated in a way that, like, historically, you can look at the, whether it's Voting Rights Act or the, school policy. When things get so bad at the state level, the federal government does get involved. And, state of Georgia, I looked this up, $15 billion comes to the state of Georgia from the federal government, whereas the state itself only provides itself $22 billion. I mean, the federal government holds real power here. And I think that's the broad dynamic that we're starting to see. And I think that, with what we're seeing now, you're going to see the federal government, in a way, rightfully step into some of these areas where, like, hey, this is some bad stuff's going on.
Well, it's kind of amazing. It's the 21st century, and we are still dealing with voting rights. It's just it's mind-boggling.
Absolutely, it is.
As my old friend used to say, the Republican Party is out of ideas. All they have are tactics. So, and no, what do you think is going to, Craig? What do you think is going to happen in Michigan? Obviously, it's a different situation here because we have a governor who would not hesitate to use her veto pen on a lot of these things. But a lot of these laws are also going to come right up against Proposal 3. Or Proposal 3 of 2018, which is a constitutional amendment. I mean, I just don't know how they're going to work their way around that.
Well, and they can't. I mean, they're going to bring this, and it's a bunch of it is obviously, a dog and pony show to show that they actually care about quote unquote voter fraud, which is absolute BS, as we know, the big lie. But what they're going to do, if she does indeed veto these things, if they pass them, which they may not, but if they do, she will veto them. They don't have the votes to override the veto. So they'll go around and they'll try to do the constitutional route, just like, Right to Life has done several times here in Michigan. You can go around the governor if you get enough signatures and bring it directly to the legislature. They pass it. The governor has no say. It's an end around a gubernatorial veto, which could happen here in Michigan. But I'm not positive that they would get the signatures that they need to do it. It's going to be tough. And especially when you had over 60% of the population vote for the changes to Michigan, I'm not sure people would be willing to go back to the polls just to change it back after one election cycle. Yeah.
So it's basically dog and pony show then.
I think so. But I hope I'm right. Because frankly, I mean, some of those changes we made, we've been talking for months how much we all benefited from those changes and how much easier it was to vote and participate and how much I liked it. I've never voted absentee before, but I don't think I'm ever going to do it the other way again.
Right.
No, I mean, I pay attention to, certain Republicans on social media, and I am just amazed at how many of them take as an article of faith that the election was stolen, that the election was corrupt, that the city of Detroit, brought its evil minions in to steal it away from its right. The person, like 150,000 votes were somehow.
The fact that so many people are willing to think to themselves without even really thinking about it, that if something happened that they didn't like in Detroit, then cheating must have happened.
Yeah.
Something, but it all goes back to that issue. I hate to be the squeaky wheel, but it all goes back to that issue of race. How can you obviously say, what about this thing was one of the most obviously racist tactics that they had. They didn't want to question anyone else in the state of Michigan, but they wanted to question Detroit. They didn't really want to question the suburbs of Wayne County. They wanted to question the city of Detroit.
We talked about this. Yes, you're absolutely right.
I talked to somebody the other day and they're like, well, dead people voted. I said,
no,
where?
They didn't.
I said, show me one. Which dead people voted? And they're like, well, in Chicago, the dead people used to vote. I said, I've never even seen any evidence of that. That was something that they talked about in the Daley administration. I said, but Daley was a white guy. And, if he did that, maybe, I don't know, but I've never seen any evidence. I said, show me that. It's just urban legend at this point in time.
The BBC did a study here in Michigan. They took 31, just randomly, 30, I think it was 31 names out of Wayne County. They found that 31 names of a list that the Republicans said were dead people who voted. They found that 28 were still alive. One had died after she voted. She had submitted her ballot. And the other 2 were ballots sent to the homes of 2 men who had the exact names as their fathers who lived at that address.
Right.
And one was a clerical error where the guy they just mixed it up. And the other one was the guy, I think, accidentally took his father's ballot with the exact same name and used that. So we had one really true mess up, and it wasn't intentional.
Only 149,999 left to go to prove that there was fraud here in Michigan. So, anyway, all right. I do want to talk about this because I've been watching a lot of news this week just because the Derek Chauvin trial is underway in Minneapolis right now. And it's been some really, really gripping testimony. This is, of course, the police officer accused in the death of George Floyd. We saw the video once again. We've seen a number of other video shots from the body cams that the police are wearing, and a lot of really powerful testimony from some of the people who were on the scene, bystanders. The one woman who was an off-duty EMS person who offered to help and they wouldn't let her. The prosecution is doing a remarkable job of showing what happened here because trying to sort of pre-butt all the arguments that the defense is going to make about him. Yes, pre-butt.
Okay.
Some of the arguments that the defense is going to make, suggesting that he was a dangerous person, maybe on some drugs, and somebody that they needed to quote unquote control because he was a large man. And I think it was Eugene Robinson in the Washington Post this morning who wrote a great column about that very notion that the police viewed this person as somebody they need to control, and how dangerous a thought process that is for police to be walking into the job every day thinking that they need to be fully in control. And you watch all those videos, the body cam video, the first thing that George Floyd says when the cops come up to his window is, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry." Clearly, he does not want a confrontation with the police. Mm-hmm. It escalates in a way that just, you can't justify it. And I have a feeling that if the police had approached this just a little bit differently, yeah, he may have been arrested, but there's no way that he ends up on the ground dying.
Well, that's what Ike McKinnon said. We had that story?
Yeah, we ran CNN.
Just a couple days ago.
He was on CNN. That's right. Yeah, I was trying to think of where it came from. Where he
that would be deadlinedetroit.com, everybody.
Yeah, deadlinedetroit.com. They killed a guy over a $20 bill. And, you have, as a police officer, you have to have a sense of perspective, and choose the battles that you want to fight. What I find the most offensive is the idea that Chauvin somehow, I think they were cross-examining some of the witnesses so far, saying, well, you called Officer Chauvin a pussy-ass bitch, didn't you? And the guy, while they were watching him strangle George Floyd, and implying that he couldn't possibly have let the guy up because then this crowd of people who had said mean things to him, might somehow fall on him and tear him limb from limb. And it's just like, God,
George Floyd was handcuffed. I mean, if you watch from the very beginning, as we've all watched now, the cop pulls a gun out on him, which was not necessary. He could have had his hand on the gun if he was really that concerned. The problem was, and we see this a lot in the cities with white cops who are not used to dealing with black people as people. And they pull him out. And in the end, there's just no justification. The man is dead. He's still got his knee on his neck, and it's clear he's unconscious and probably dead, and he continues. I mean, there's no justification for that. There's no justification to treat him the way he did. I mean, he was saying, "I'm claustrophobic. Please don't put me in the car. Can I sit in the front seat?" They could have said, "All right, sit at the edge of the seat. Let's just calm down." They knew he was high. Or they assumed he was. They could have just said, "Okay, just relax. Let's just calm down." There was no rush, like you say. $20 bill. It wasn't like they'd finally captured a serial killer. They had just captured a guy who had just murdered 15 people. It was
just
a
terrible
$20 bill. Yeah.
Well, and I mean,
It was a defaced $20 bill.
yeah.
That's what this is about. It's but what you have.
Somebody drew a mustache on it, or what? I mean, defaced. I thought it was a counterfeit. I mean, people still try to do that.
I mean, and then you look at it. This is the constant interaction of why I promote why you need more African American officers who speak the language. Or I could say the story of a guy I went to school, Bobby Dingus or Eric Scheibel. These are white guys, but they grew up around and understand the community and understand how to talk to people who don't necessarily look the same color, but they speak the same language because we're from the same culture. We're from the same neighborhood. And, that's why they call it community policing. These guys clearly are not, don't want to be associated with this type of community. How do you do that? I watched that video again because I watched the opening statement over the course of the week, and I couldn't watch it all at one time, but it took me 2 or 3 times to stop my camera and watching them just exact the life from him. And then his partner, this guy Chauvin's on trial, but all of them should be on trial. That guy stood by as people are telling him that the guy, they have all been fired, I believe, but I think his name is Tao, the little shorter guy, Asian American gentleman. And he's standing there and he, with his chest stuck out and, just defiant.
Yeah.
Defiant to the reality of this man losing his life, even after they kind of took that limp body and rolled it onto the canvas. But there's a lack of respect for African American life from people like this, who they are, and to cast white people in a stereotype. I will never do that. But those people right there, I'm not stereotyping. I've seen their behavior. We all have seen their behavior. Every single one of them. You know what I'm saying? So, there's, because hold up, the firefighter, the off-duty firefighter, she's white and she is actually livid. I mean, they treated her like, there used to be a concept my dad used to talk about back in the 30s and the 40s. And, this is like folklore, but my dad told me, he worked at a barbershop on Hastings Street, which was in Black Bottom. He said what they used to do. A black man would date a white woman. They would beat his ass and take him to jail, and they would send her to the sanitarium because she must be crazy. That's what we got here. That's how it is. So, and I have no reason to doubt that those things happened. And, I understand no one's going to stand up for it now, just like people won't talk about the fact that they used to make the black man run out of the back of the house when the people from social services came there because a man couldn't be in the house while the woman was getting social services. They don't want to talk about that.
Ike McKinnon, the former police chief on CNN, I mean, he put it best when he just said that it was dehumanizing. And I always say this, whatever group it is, when one group can dehumanize another one, they can do anything to that person. And we've seen it through history. We've seen it through slavery. We've seen it through the Holocaust. We've seen it through, in Cambodia with the Armenian genocide. One group just decides the other group is subhuman and then go at it, do whatever you want to them, killing them.
The one thing I'm going to be watching with the defense for Derek Chauvin, I mean, they're clearly going to try to paint George Floyd as a dangerous man. And I hate the fact that they can sit there, well, he must have been on something. What does that mean? Is he on opioids? Is he smoking a little pot? Usually that mellows people out. I mean, it's not like we see a whole lot of people running around on angel dust these days, right? It's not like, and people aren't buying into this sort of drug paranoia that we used to in terms of this kind of stuff. Yes, he may have had some substance in his system, but that does not mean he deserved to die. And that's the whole thing. And when you look at the video of the original contact with him, he did not look like he was raging in any way. He looked like he was maybe trying to get his shit together a little bit. Absolutely. But he was calm. He was quiet until the situation escalated. And that's the whole thing. It didn't have to be this way. Well, and for them to sit there and blame the drugs or say that he's at fault for dying is something that I hope the prosecution has done a good job of wiping from the jury's mind.
But the part of the testimony when the girlfriend was talking, and they were trying to show that he was through the prosecution that he was physically fit that he was, that he worked out, that he did all the stuff. Now the defense is trying to say, oh my God, this guy is a scary dude. He's a scary black man. He lifts weights and does all that kind of stuff. And he was on drugs. Wouldn't you be scared too?
Speaking as a person,
what it is that they're selling, it's the fact that he's black that they're afraid of him. The fact that he's a big guy and he's black that they're afraid of him. But, in every professional that's come into this trial so far and talked about it, just like I know as a lawyer, one thing is my job is to de-escalate. And that's what their job is, to de-escalate. All the escalation happened by them. And it's that onerous fear that they clearly had of this black man in their presence and the power to do whatever they wanted about it. This guy stood on his neck 4 minutes after he had expired.
Speaking as somebody who did census work on the east side of Detroit and dealt almost probably 90% with black people, let me just say that marijuana was my best friend. I could honest to God, I would walk up to these houses. And I remember one day I walk up to this house and nobody answers the door, but I can hear music bumping from a Charger parked in the driveway with those black tinted windows. So I walk up and I knock on the window and the window goes down and literal clouds of weed smoke come out. And I say, hi, I'm here from the census and I'd like to do a survey on your household. And those two guys just like, okay.
So clearly they weren't on their way to the caucus club.
No, they weren't.
All right. Real quick, we've got to move on because we're running out of time. And I do want to get to one other thing. Infrastructure Week. It became a joke. Because remember, and we've been waiting for a healthcare plan for a long time as well. But now Joe Biden just rolled out a pretty large infrastructure plan, $2 billion over, I think, 8 years, $2 trillion, excuse me.
$2 trillion, yes, with a T.
With a lot of different things in there. I mean, that is a huge amount of money to wrap your head around. And Brendan, I want to bring you in on this as somebody who's worked on budgets a lot. $2 trillion. And some of it's very targeted, but it's very nebulous at this point in time. I'm going to be interested to see whether or not we can get any Republicans to vote in favor of this, especially if it relies on tax increases for the wealthy, which is what it looks like it's going to rely on. There's actually some of this is going to be paid for, but it doesn't look like there's any way this could be fully paid for.
I think a couple
from the corporate tax.
We'll get Brendan, then we'll bring you in, Todd. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, a couple thoughts on this. Todd is right. The corporate tax, went from 35% to 21% in 2017, but whenever we got to be careful about using absolute numbers. I'm a big believer in proportion. Anybody who reads my site knows I love proportion. And when you look at infrastructure spending as a percentage of GDP, the U.S. is like half of a percent. Such wild spenders like Russia are at double that. And hold on to your hat, China. If the United States' percent of GDP spent on infrastructure is 0.5%, China's is 5.6%. Wow. I mean, it's massive. So, and they're the outlier on the high end. But I mean, I think the arms race that we're engaged in now. Pardon me?
I said it's paying off for China.
Yeah, it is. And I think that's, look at what China is doing commercially, economically. I mean, it's the new car capital. It's the new everything capital. So I think it's a shocking number to hear 2 trillion, but when you put it into context of percentage of GDP, the US is not a whole lot different from Spain,
Yeah.
So we got some work to do on infrastructure. And one other nerdy fact. I mean, the pandemic ended the longest run of economic expansion we've ever seen, yet infrastructure spending just didn't keep pace. I mean, there's all of the logic in the world says infrastructure spending is necessary and good for a bunch of different reasons.
Well, and we also had that expansion and lack of investment in infrastructure at a time when money was basically free.
Yeah,
I mean, the time to do bonding,
negative interest rates at times.
I know the time to do borrowing and bonding to build tunnels and bridges, and I mean, and at the same time, we had highway bridges falling down. We had tunnels collapsing in what happened in Chicago where they had that underwater flood. I mean, all these things are happening. They're red flags. Flint, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, and it's just like, it's about time this is done. But I like the direction that he's talking about, huge push towards electrification. Obviously, West Virginia is going to whine about coal jobs, but I mean,
coal's over. Sorry, West Virginia. No wonder you're all on opioids.
There's also job retraining. There's job retraining funds that are included in here to,
Yes.
Hey, how do we find a way to put West Virginia at the forefront of some of this stuff?
Well,
they
Joe
could
Manchin's
do that
in the catbird seat. So,
well, he certainly is. But that's the question. Will Joe Manchin go along with this, or is he going to kowtow to his voters and worry about a tax increase that doesn't impact almost anybody in West Virginia?
Right. No, none. It's all corporate.
Yeah. And I don't think putting it back to 28% is what they're proposing is that big a deal. In fact, I mean, most of the corporations said the original tax cut was too big.
Yeah,
well,
they did.
And then this is where, and I brought up tax credits before. I mean, you're just dealing with surface numbers on these tax rates. When you start talking about tax credits, the effective tax rates on some of these companies is nothing. I mean, literally nothing. So that's really where there's a lot of the headlines of the tax code are easy to digest, but it's all of that line item detail. One other quick factoid that, the state of Michigan expends more on tax credits than they do on spending for education annually. I mean, it's a huge, huge issue. And it's it's as the states compete with one another for these tax credits, and there's a huge question out there whether it even matters.
Yeah, very true.
All right. Well, okay. We've got about 10 minutes left and we have to get to Schmuck of the Week in just a bit, but I do want to talk about this. Michigan, once again, is number one in one thing. COVID spike. Yeah. And I'm not exactly sure why this is happening. And I was listening to Dr. Fauci this morning, who was asked about it, and he didn't really have a good answer for it either, other than the variant here that came in from the UK spreads pretty quickly, and that this could be a forerunner for what's going to happen in other states. Right. But really, it is a race to get people vaccinated at this point, because we could see a spike in hospitalizations and deaths if we're not careful. I think they're so anxious to get outside and do stuff. I don't think people care anymore. I
think it is. I listened to the interview on WXYZ, and I think it's a combination. He said it's either in part or largely because of the variants, and that with the combination of people just saying, "Hey, I don't care." And it's the numbers are skyrocketing again.
Well,
and
go ahead.
Yeah, and so I think it's a combination of just people just saying screw it. I just and look, the governor as she loosened up things, and she hasn't wanted to tighten it again, because we see like in the Detroit News there's a column saying, when are you going to let loose already? When are you going to give us our freedom?
Can we not give oxygen to Ingrid Jacques today? No, I want to make one other quick point, though. We also, Michigan did really well at keeping our numbers down. And now these new variants are here. People are getting careless, as you mentioned, but we also have a lot of unburnt forest here. I was just talking to a friend of mine who is a former colleague and a data nerd, and he said, we just may have a vulnerable population because we don't have as many people who, we're not South Dakota. We didn't let it run wild. And so we have a lot of people who are susceptible to this, and the fact that it's a new variant. But I got my shot.
I got my first one. My second one comes in a few days, and I'm pretty excited about that. It doesn't mean that I'm going to run wild. And guess what? Just because I'm vaccinated, I'm still going to wear my mask, everybody, because I may be able to carry it, and I don't want you to get sick. That's why I wear a mask, is because I don't want you to get sick. It doesn't have anything to do with me. It's about everybody else that I come in contact with, because I try. I sometimes fail, but for the most part, I try to be a decent freaking human being.
You sound like Alexander Portnoy's mother. You know what my problem is? I'm too good.
I am not too good. I am not. I have plenty of failings, believe me.
But this highbrow we're talking Alexander Portnoy.
Well, that's the most lowbrow of Philip Roth's.
I did work for public radio, so. All right. Okay, we've got about 5 minutes left, everybody, and that means, and Mr. Lucido walked away, so I'm going to do this myself because he walked away. So everybody, with 5 minutes left in the program.
And now, it's time for Deadline Detroit's nominees for Schmuck of the Week.
Schmuck of the Week nominees. Schmuck of the Week nominees. There are some good ones. And as I said at the beginning of the program, I think if there is a Schmuck of the Week, it's got to be Matt Gaetz. But, it was so obvious. He got his own segment this week. So we need to go some other directions. If you want to nominate Gaetz, you can. You can. But who wants to go first? Nancy's got her hand up.
Yeah, I'll go first. And I'm going to go with Ron Weiser.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
No, actually, we talked about this beforehand.
There's plenty of schmucks out there.
I wanted to get to this, but I thought it'd be a good schmuck segment. Go ahead.
Okay, Ron Weiser. Last week, I believe was it after this show? Because
yes, right after we went off the air, else he would have been schmuck of the week last
Friday.
week.
We find out that he had referred to the governor, secretary of state, and attorney general as the three witches. Referred to them being burned at the stake. Made a crack about how he couldn't do anything about
Peter Meyer and Fred Upton.
Fred Upton. I was trying to think. I wanted to call him Ron Upton for some reason. Yeah, Fred Upton and Peter Meyer, short of assassination. And then, of course, when called on it, he called out his flying monkey, Michonne Maddock, who, did Harry Trumpy thing. And so the whole party the whole party is diseased. And I hate to see that because I really do believe in a loyal opposition. But that guy.
But loyal opposition means loyal to, a truthful.
Yes, I know.
Truthful place that you're coming from.
I believe in the loyal opposition, and I am sad to see what has happened to the Michigan GOP.
All right, well, Langle, what did you want to add to that?
Does it? Well, he's apparently. I mean, my feeling is, look, the U of M board now, the Board of Regents has voted to censure him. They're asking him to resign. He says, "I want to be canceled." The thing is, you know what? The GOP, nobody's asking him to resign as GOP chair because they expect a schmuck to run the party. But
it takes a schmuck.
Yeah, but
he makes Laura Cox look like Mother Teresa, though.
Right.
I mean, and she was no piker when it came to being a schmuckette. So there.
Very true.
But the fact is, at U of M, it doesn't mean you have to be a Democrat to be on the board. Obviously, you don't have to be a Democrat to represent. But it is a university. And it does have certain standards, and he certainly has failed in representing that standard. And for that, it's not just that he said something; he's representing. I mean, look, he wants to be a schmuck on his own, fine. But when you're sitting on a board that represents a university that takes pride in being inclusive and all that kind of stuff, it's another story. Yeah. My schmuck of the week, my alternative would be Dr. Birx. I just feel, now she's coming out and saying how horrible it was and how basically you're working under a fascist regime, that they didn't want to tell the truth. It's like, that was her job. We rely on these people. They're doctors, they're scientists. We rely on them, and she failed us.
It's amazing to me how many people that were in that administration said, I thought I should stick around because I needed to contain the crazy and make sure things didn't get too far out of hand. And I'm like, how much worse could they have gotten had you left?
Right.
I mean, it's like,
Deborah Birx, we strip you
right.
of the sisterhood of the
scarf. You can no longer wear a scarf ever.
Oh boy. All right. Brendan Walsh, do you have a schmuck of the week, sir?
I do. I think along the lines of what we're talking about with Georgia, when I started reading about what the Texas State Senate's doing, Senate Bill 7, and their proposal to, in the face of the largest voter turnout they've ever seen in Texas, they all of a sudden discover all these problems that they need to solve. The 14 Senate state Republicans that are sponsored this bill, and it's likely to pass. We got the same dynamic going on with Dell and American are starting to pipe up early against it, which is good. But I mean, I just think the bold-facedness in light of what everybody is seeing in Georgia this just happened a day ago. So this thing is going to be going on for a long time in all these states. And I think it's a good idea for everybody to keep abreast. I mean, this is really where the action happens.
I would agree with Brendan on that one. Todd Perkins, who is your schmuck of the week, sir?
So I have, hold on. I have Joel Greenberg. So, but it's interesting. He led them to this guy, clown Gaetz. But what Joel Greenberg did. I was watching. It might have been Rachel Maddow. What made him so much of a schmuck, besides him stealing and doing all these other things, there was another individual, I believe he was a teacher, that decided to run for tax collector and run against him for a position. He wrote that school these anonymous letters talking about this guy had done, this teacher who wanted to run for this position, that he had done things that were inappropriate with students, about 9 letters. So the school called in the FBI, and come to find out his DNA and his fingerprints were all over these letters. And this is what led to him, God, we have a humorous God that I worship. And, he has a way of, some people call it karma, but I mean, you're going to claim that this guy had some inappropriate relationships. We're all debunked. Everything was, but when you say things, particularly as it relates to children or sexual nature, that's a scar that lives, that's a very salacious statement. And he did this just because this guy was running against him. And now come to pass, he's in the crosshairs in an indictment for sex trafficking. He's an indictment for beyond sex trafficking, stealing $400,000 and buying memorabilia and stuff like that. But this is that part of that underbelly that was really, the underbelly became the top, the top tier in this country for quite some time, and this is what happened. But he is absolutely a schmuck. I mean, this, you're going to make a claim against a teacher or someone who's in education who having done something against some children, and it's a completely falsehood. You deserve everything that the law has coming for you.
Well, here's something you need to know about this Greenberg guy too. I mean, you see the pictures that are out there with he and Gaetz, and of course Roger Stone hanging out with him. The company you keep, people. Think about that for just a second. All right, I've got one schmuck of the week, and it is Peter Navarro, of course, former Trump advisor. And I'm really hoping that that Dr. Fauci has the attorneys for Dominion Systems on speed dial, because they're going to be experts at defamation suits. And Peter Navarro is possibly facing one from Dr. Fauci for saying that Fauci may be partially responsible for the coronavirus because he was working secretly with a lab in Wuhan that unleashed this virus upon the world, and saying that Fauci is somehow involved. He said this on Fox News. Wow. And the host on Fox News, and I can't remember her name, did not push back in any way, shape, or form and say, where did that come from? What proof do you have that that is the case? She just allowed it to go on. So Peter Navarro suggesting that Dr. Fauci is somehow involved in unleashing this virus on the world from a lab in Wuhan.
Unreal.
Schmuck of the week.
Unreal.
As much
disinformation continues.
They were not wanting to do anything when the pandemic started. Nothing.
Yeah. And if they had some proof that the Chinese government, as they said, the Chinese communist government was somehow involved in this, you don't think that Trump would have been shouting that from the rooftops, saying, and that would be a declaration of war kind of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be international war crimes. That would be something that the whole world would be freaking out about right now. And then to sit there and say somehow a fellow government official was involved in this. Oh, my God. How stupid can you be? And irresponsible can you be? I guess that's what bothers me the most, is the irresponsibility of all of this. And
yeah.
Lessons for everybody. Look before you leap, please, or else find yourself at the wrong end of a really bad defamation suit.
Yeah.
Lessons we all can, the more you know, right? Isn't that it? All right. We've got to wrap up the show for today. I would like to thank all of my guests for being here today. Todd Perkins, we always appreciate it, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Brendan Walsh, nice job, sir. We'll have you back for sure. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Nancy Derringer and Alan Lengel of Deadline Detroit. We will see you both next week, of course. Right. We always appreciate it. Thanks to Michael Lucido for engineering the broadcast today. We always appreciate his help behind the scenes. And thanks to, of course, Lynette's Shrimp House for sponsoring this show and DeadlineDetroit.com. And don't forget, become a member at DeadlineDetroit.com, DeadlineDetroit.com/membership. All of your news needs met on this one little website that we put together each and every day. We'd love to see you there, and become a member, just $3 a month. You might win some prizes. You never know. But in the meantime, you'll help us keep this little thing going. We appreciate it very much. Have a fantastic weekend, everybody. And until we all get vaccinated,
stay home safely.
The Craig Foley Show on Deadline Detroit is made possible in part by Lynette's Shrimp House, located in Highland Park. It's Metro Detroit's premier destination, serving juicy fried shrimp, fish, and wings alongside soul food sides and new additions to the menu like turkey tacos and desserts. Located at 13548 Woodward in Highland Park, just north of the Davison, Lynette's is open for takeaway noon to 8 Tuesday and Thursday, noon to 10 p.m. Friday and Saturday, and noon to 5 p.m. on Sunday. Call now, get some Lynette's.